The autumn wind carried the scent of rain as Natalie Morgan stood on the wooden deck of Morgan's Riverside Inn, watching the sunset paint the Hudson River in shades of amber and gold. Once this view had brought her peace. Now, it only reminded her of everything she was about to lose. The inn had been in her family for 3 generations. Her grandmother had opened it in 1962, a modest establishment that had grown into a beloved destination for travelers seeking charm and authenticity. Natalie's father had expanded it, adding, the riverside restaurant that became famous for its Sunday brunch. When he passed away 18 months ago, Natalie had inherited not just the property, but the weight of family history. She had also inherited the debts. Her phone buzzed for the 3rd time that hour. Another creditor, another threat, another reminder that she had exactly 14 days before the bank seized the property. Natalie had tried everything. She had applied for loans, sought investors, even considered selling the antique furnishings her grandmother had collected. Nothing had been enough. The restaurant door opened behind her. Natalie turned, expecting to see her sister Rachel, who helped manage the front desk between college classes. Instead, a man in an impeccably tailored navy suit stepped onto the deck. He was tall, with dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on magazine covers. His eyes were an unusual shade of blue, like winter ice, and they studied her with unsettling intensity. "Natalie Morgan," he said. His voice was smooth, confident, carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. "We're closed for a private event tonight," Natalie replied, though no such event existed. The dining room had been empty all week. "I know. I rented the entire property for this conversation." He moved toward her, his expensive shoes clicking against the weathered wood. "My name is Vincent Sterling." Recognition sparked in Natalie's mind. Vincent Sterling, founder and CEO of Sterling Innovations, the tech company that had revolutionized cloud computing. Forbes had recently valued his net worth at somewhere north of $3 billion. What would someone like him want with her struggling in? "Mr. Sterling, if this is about purchasing the property, I should tell you I'm not interested in buying your inn," he interrupted. "I'm here to offer you $5 million to marry me." The words seemed to hang in the air between them. Natalie stared at him, certain she had misheard. "Excuse me?" Vincent pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before turning it toward her. "My grandfather, Thomas Sterling, built his fortune from nothing. When he died 6 months ago, he left controlling interest in Sterling Innovations to me, but with a specific condition. I must be married before my 35th birthday, which happens to be in exactly 28 days. "That's ridiculous," Natalie said, though she found herself looking at the phone screen, which displayed what appeared to be a legal document. "My grandfather believed marriage brought stability and focus. He wrote this clause into his will because he feared I would never settle down otherwise." Vincent pocketed his phone. "If I fail to meet this condition, my shares will be distributed among the board of directors, several of whom have been trying to push me out for years. I refuse to lose the company I built because of an outdated romantic notion." Natalie's mind raced. "There must be dozens of women who would marry you." "Why me?" "Because you need money desperately enough to agree to my terms. But you're not the type to develop unrealistic expectations about our arrangement." Vincent moved to the railing, gazing out at the river. "I had my team research potential candidates. You're intelligent, you run a business, and you understand the value of loyalty and hard work. Most importantly, you're facing foreclosure in 2 weeks. This solves both our problems." "You investigated me?" Indignation flared in Natalie's chest. "I investigate everyone I do business with. This is business, Miss Morgan, nothing more." He turned to face her. $5 million. "You'll live in my apartment for 2 years, appear at necessary social functions, and maintain the appearance of a happy marriage. At the end of 2 years, we divorce quietly. You keep the money, I keep my company. Simple." "Adding about this is simple," Natalie said, but her voice lacked conviction. $5 million would save the inn, pay off every debt, and leave enough to renovate and expand. She could hire back the staff she had been forced to let go. She could restore the property to its former glory. "You have 24 hours to decide," Vincent said, producing a business card from his jacket. My lawyer will have the contract ready whenever you are." After he left, Natalie stood on the deck until darkness fell completely. She thought about her father, who had taught her that family legacy mattered more than money. She thought about her grandmother, who had believed in true love and soulmates. She thought about Rachel, who was working 2 jobs while attending college because Natalie could no longer afford to help with tuition. She thought about the inn, silent and empty, waiting to be taken away. That night, Natalie barely slept. Walked through every room of the inn, touching walls that held a century of memories. She sat in the kitchen where her grandmother had taught her to make apple pie. She stood in the garden where her parents had renewed their vows on their 25th anniversary. By morning, her decision was made. She called the number on Vincent Sterling's card. He answered on the first ring. "I'll do it," Natalie said. "But I have conditions. I expected nothing less." She could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Come to my office this afternoon. We'll discuss the terms." As Natalie ended the call, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her, the one who had just agreed to marry a stranger for money. But sometimes survival required impossible choices. Sometimes protecting what you loved meant sacrificing who you thought you were. She just hoped the cost wouldn't be higher than she could bear. The Sterling Innovations headquarters occupied 42 floors of gleaming glass and steel in downtown Manhattan. Natalie felt small standing in the marble lobby, surrounded by employees in designer clothes who moved with the purposeful efficiency of people who knew their worth. She wore her best blazer, purchased 3 years ago for a business conference, and tried not to feel inadequate. Vincent's assistant, Claire Bennett, met her at the elevator. The woman was polished and professional, with kind eyes that seemed to see more than Natalie wanted to reveal. "Mr. Sterling is finishing a conference call," Claire said as they rode to the top floor. "He asked me to make you comfortable in his office." Vincent's office was a study in minimalist luxury. Flirt-tealing windows offered a breathtaking view of the city's skyline. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors. But what struck Natalie most was the complete absence of personal items. No photographs, no mementos. Nothing that suggested the space belonged to an actual human being rather than a very wealthy ghost. Vincent arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather folder. He had removed his suit jacket, and his white shirt sleeves were rolled to his elbows. It was the most casual Natalie had seen him, though he still radiated that same controlled intensity. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the conference table near the windows. "Shall we review the contract?" The document was 37 pages long. Natalie read every word while Vincent worked silently on his laptop. The terms were clear and cold. $5 million paid in 3 installments. 2 years of marriage. Separate living spaces within his apartment. No intimate relationship required unless absolutely necessary for public appearances. A strict confidentiality agreement that would result in financial penalties if broken. "This clause about public appearances," Natalie said, pointing to page 12. "What exactly does that entail?" "Charity galas, business dinners, occasional social events. My grandfather was well known in certain circles. People will expect to meet my wife." Vincent closed his laptop. "I estimate no more than 2 or 3 events per month, and the rest of the time. You're free to do whatever you wish. Run your inn, see your friends, live your life. I only ask that you be discreet and maintain the appearance that we're a normal married couple to anyone outside our immediate circle." Natalie found a pen in her purse. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed each page, watching her signature commit her to 2 years with a man she barely knew. When she finished, Vincent signed as well, his handwriting bold and decisive. "The wedding is scheduled for next Friday," he said, returning the contract to its folder. "Civil ceremony at City Hall. We'll need 2 witnesses." "I'll arrange everything, that's it." Natalie asked. "No engagement period. No getting to know each other." Vincent's expression remained neutral. "What would be the purpose? This isn't a real marriage, Miss Morgan. We both need to remember that." The ceremony took place on a gray Friday morning at the Manhattan Marriage Bureau. Claire and another Sterling Innovations employee served as witnesses. The officiant, a tired-looking woman who had clearly performed hundreds of these ceremonies, rushed through the standard vows. When she pronounced them married, Vincent kissed Natalie briefly. A cool press of lips that felt more like signing another contract than celebrating a union. Afterward, Vincent returned to his office. Natalie went back to the inn, now saved from foreclosure by the first payment that had appeared in her account that morning. She should have felt relieved, triumphant even. Instead, she felt hollow. Moving into Vincent's apartment the following week was surreal. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building in Tribeca, with floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and that same impersonal quality that characterized his office. Vincent showed her to the guest suite, a beautiful space with its own bathroom and sitting area. "You'll have complete privacy here," he said. "I'm rarely home before 10 in the evening. I usually leave by 6 in the morning. We'll barely see each other." He was right. For the first month of their marriage, Natalie and Vincent existed as polite strangers sharing an address. They passed each other in the hallway, exchanged brief pleasantries, and otherwise lived separate lives. Natalie threw herself into renovating the inn, hiring back her staff, planning the grand reopening. She should have been happy. Her problems were solved, but the apartment felt like a beautiful cage, and she found herself lonely in ways she had never experienced before. Everything changed on a Tuesday evening when Vincent came home at 7 instead of his usual late hour. Natalie was in the kitchen preparing dinner, something she did most nights even though she always ate alone. She heard the door slam with unusual force. She found him in the living room, his tie loosened, his normally perfect hair disheveled. A tumbler of whiskey sat on the coffee table, already half empty. "Vincent," she ventured. "Is everything okay?" He looked at her with eyes that held something she had never seen before. Vulnerability. "The board is challenging the validity of our marriage," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They've hired investigators. They know we maintain separate bedrooms. They know we barely speak. They're claiming fraud." Natalie's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means if they can prove our marriage is a sham, I lose everything. The company, my grandfather, shares all of it."
Ow.
Vincent stood, pacing to the windows. "They have photographs of us coming and going separately. They have testimony from building staff that we never display any affection. They're building a case. What do we do?" Vincent turned to face her, and in his eyes, Natalie saw fear mixed with determination. "We have to make it look real. Actually real. No more separate bedrooms. No more living like strangers. We need to convince everyone, including the investigators, that this is a genuine marriage." The thought of sharing a bedroom with Vincent sent a flutter of panic through Natalie's chest. For how long? Until they back off. Weeks, maybe months. He ran a hand through his hair. "I know this wasn't part of our agreement. If you want out, I'll understand. I'll still honor the contract financially." Natalie thought about the inn. About her employees who depended on their jobs. About Rachel, who was thriving in school now that money was no longer a constant worry. But more than that, she looked at Vincent and saw something beyond the cold businessman. She saw someone scared and alone. Someone who had built walls so high, he had forgotten what it felt like to let anyone in. "I'm not backing out," she said quietly. "We made a deal. I keep my promises." Relief flickered across Vincent's face. "Thank you." That night, Natalie moved her belongings into the master bedroom. The space was enormous, dominated by a king-size bed that suddenly seemed impossibly intimate. Vincent insisted on taking the couch, but Natalie knew that would never fool investigators. "We're adults," she said, climbing into one side of the bed. "We can share a bed without it meaning anything." But lying in the darkness, listening to Vincent's breathing on the other side of the mattress, Natalie felt anything but adult. She was hyper-aware of his presence, the warmth radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his cologne on the pillows. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, her dreams were filled with confusion and an emotion she refused to name. The next morning, Claire called with news of a charity gala that evening. "The board members will all be there," she said. "This is your chance to show them your marriage is real." As Natalie prepared for the event, wearing an elegant navy dress that Vincent had sent over, she caught her reflection in the mirror. She barely recognized herself. In the span of 6 weeks, she had become someone's wife, moved into a luxury penthouse, and now she was about to play the role of her life. She just hoped she could remember it was only a role. Because the alternative, admitting that her feelings for Vincent were becoming dangerously real, was something she could not afford to consider. The gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Transformed for the evening into a glittering wonderland of crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. Natalie descended from the limousine Vincent had sent, her heart hammering against her ribs. The navy dress hugged her figure perfectly, and a stylist had arranged her dark hair into an elegant updo. She felt like someone playing dress-up in someone else's life. Vincent waited at the entrance, devastatingly handsome in a black tuxedo. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes before the familiar mask of control slid back into place. "You look beautiful," he said, offering his arm. The words were probably for show, but they sent warmth through Natalie's chest nonetheless. Inside, the museum buzzed with Manhattan's elite. Businessmen in expensive suits mingled with socialites dripping in diamonds. Vincent kept his hand on the small of Natalie's back, a gesture that appeared possessive but felt protective. She could feel the heat of his palm through the thin fabric of her dress. "There's Gerald Thompson," Vincent murmured, nodding toward a silver-haired man holding court near the Egyptian exhibit. "He's leading the charge against me on the board. We need to be convincing." They circulated through the crowd, and Vincent introduced Natalie as his wife with what almost sounded like genuine pride. He laughed at her observations about the art, his hand finding hers and intertwining their fingers. To anyone watching, they looked like newlyweds, still wrapped up in each other. But Natalie began to notice something that confused her. The way Vincent's thumb absently traced circles on her hand. The way his eyes sought her out across the room when they were briefly separated. The way his smile, when it appeared, seemed to reach his eyes for the first time. When the orchestra began playing, Vincent led her to the dance floor. He pulled her close, one hand at her waist, the other cradling her hand against his chest. Natalie could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. "They're watching," he whispered against her ear. "We need to sell this." Natalie nodded, trying to ignore the way her body responded to his nearness. But as they swayed to the music, she realized Vincent was holding her closer than necessary. His cheek rested against her temple, and his breathing had changed, becoming slower and deeper. "Natalie," he said softly, and something in his voice made her look up. Their faces were inches apart, and in his ice-blue eyes, she saw a confusion that mirrored her own. The moment shattered when Gerald Thompson appeared beside them, his smile sharp and knowing. "What a lovely surprise to see you here with your bride," he said, though his tone suggested nothing was surprising about it. "Tell me, Mrs. Sterling, how did you and Vincent meet?" "I don't recall hearing the story." Natalie felt Vincent tense beside her. They had never discussed this, never prepared a story. "At my family's inn," she said smoothly, surprising herself. "Vincent came in during a terrible storm. We talked all night, and by morning, we both knew something had changed." "How romantic," Gerald said, skepticism dripping from every word. "And this inn? Is it in the city?" "Along the Hudson River, Morgan's Riverside Inn. My family has owned it for 3 generations. Natalie met his gaze steadily. "Vincent helped me save it when I was facing some financial difficulties. That's when I realized what kind of man he truly was." Something softened in Gerald's expression. "I lost my own family business years ago. I wish I'd had someone to help me fight for it." He nodded to Vincent. "Perhaps I've been too hasty in my judgment. A man who helps preserve family legacy understands what truly matters." After he walked away, Vincent stared at Natalie with something like wonder. "That was brilliant." "How did you know what to say?" "I told him the truth," Natalie said. "Just not all of it." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and champagne. Vincent never left her side, and slowly, Natalie stopped thinking about the performance and started simply enjoying his company. He was witty and intelligent, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard. When he spoke about his grandfather, his voice held genuine affection that contradicted everything he had said about not believing in love. They returned to the penthouse near midnight. The tension from earlier had dissolved into something comfortable, almost companionable. Natalie kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. Thank you for tonight, Vincent said, loosening his bow tie. You were perfect. It was easier than I expected, Natalie admitted. You're actually quite charming when you want to be. Vincent smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. Don't let that get around. I have a reputation to maintain. They prepared for bed with the awkward politeness of people still learning to share space. But when Natalie climbed under the covers, Vincent didn't immediately turn away as he had the previous nights. Instead, he lay on his back, staring at the ceiling. Can I ask you something? He said into the darkness. Of course. Do you ever regret it? Agreeing to this arrangement? Natalie considered the question carefully. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd found another way to save the inn. But no, I don't regret it, do you? I thought I wouldn't, Vincent said quietly. I thought this would be simple. A business transaction, nothing more. But lately, I find myself thinking about things I've spent years avoiding. What kind of things? He turned his head to look at her, and even in the dim light filtering through the windows, Natalie could see the vulnerability in his expression. What it might be like to have something real. Someone who chooses to stay not because of a contract, but because they want to. Natalie's heart hammered in her chest. Vincent, I watched my parents destroy each other in the name of love, he continued. They were passionate and volatile, and their relationship was a war zone. When my mother finally left, my father fell apart. He drank himself to death within a year. I was 15. I promised myself I would never let emotion control me like that. That wasn't love, Natalie said softly. That was pain and dysfunction dressed up as passion. How do you know the difference? Real love doesn't destroy, it builds. It makes you better, not worse. She hesitated, then added, my parents had that. They supported each other, lifted each other up. When my father got sick, my mother never left his side. And when he died, she grieved, but she didn't fall apart. She knew he would want her to keep living. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. I envy you that. Having that example, it's never too late to believe in something different. He reached across the space between them, his fingers finding hers in the darkness. I'm starting to think you might be right. The next morning, Natalie woke to find Vincent already gone, but a note sat on his pillow. Thank you for last night. Not just the performance, but the conversation. You've given me a lot to think about. Oh. Over the following weeks, something shifted between them. Vincent started coming home earlier. They began having dinner together, conversations flowing easily as they learned about each other's lives, dreams, and fears. He asked about the inn, genuinely interested in her renovation plans. She asked about Sterling innovations, and he lit up as he described the new technology his team was developing. The investigators continued their surveillance. But Vincent and Natalie no longer had to fake their connection. They held hands while watching movies. They laughed together over breakfast. They fell asleep talking in the darkness. Vincent's arm draped across her waist in a gesture that felt natural rather than calculated. One evening, Natalie was working on the end's accounts at the dining table when Vincent came home carrying takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. I thought you might be hungry, he said. Unpacking containers of pad Thai and spring rolls. How did you know this was my favorite? Natalie asked, surprised. You mentioned it 3 weeks ago. You said your father used to bring it home every Friday night? Vincent sat across from her, his expression serious. Natalie, I need to tell you something. Her heart stopped. What is it? The board dropped their investigation yesterday. Gerald Thompson called me personally to apologize. He said seeing us together at the gala convinced him our marriage was genuine. Vincent paused, his ice blue eyes locked on hers. We don't have to keep pretending anymore. Natalie felt the world tilt beneath her. Oh, according to our contract, we can go back to living separately. You can move back to the guest suite. We can return to our original arrangement. Vincent's voice was careful, neutral. Unless you don't want to? What do you want? Natalie asked, barely breathing. Vincent stood, moving around the table until he stood before her. He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle and reverent. I want you to stay. Not because of a contract or an investigation or any other reason, except that I've fallen in love with you. Natalie Morgan Sterling? Somewhere between the charity galas and the midnight conversations, You became the most important person in my life. You showed me that love doesn't have to be destructive. It can be the best thing that ever happens to you. Tears spilled down Natalie's cheeks. I love you too. I think I have for weeks, but I was afraid to admit it. I thought you would think I was breaking our agreement. To hell with the agreement, Vincent said, and then he kissed her. This time, there was nothing cold or contractual about it. It was warm and deep and filled with all the emotion they had been holding back. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. So where does this leave us? Natalie asked. I think Vincent said with a smile that lit up his entire face, we should start over. Go on actual dates. Court each other properly. And in 2 years, when our contract expires, I'm going to ask you to marry me again. For real this time? You're going to make me wait 2 years? Natalie laughed through her tears. Unless you want to renew our vows sooner. I'm flexible. Pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. I just know that I want forever with you, whatever that looks like. Outside the windows, the city lights sparkled like stars brought down to earth. Natalie thought about the desperate woman who had agreed to marry a stranger to save her family's inn. She had thought she was sacrificing her dreams of love for financial security. Instead, she had found something far more valuable. She had found a partner, a best friend, and a love that proved even the most carefully constructed walls could come down when the right person showed you it was safe to be vulnerable. Their marriage had started as a contract, a transaction designed to solve problems and maintain control. But love, Natalie realized, couldn't be contained by contracts or controlled by logic. It grew in unexpected places, between two people who thought they had everything figured out. Vincent Sterling had wanted a paper marriage to save his company. Instead, he had found something that left him speechless. A love story that rewrote all his rules and showed him that the greatest risk was also the greatest reward. And Natalie had learned that sometimes the best things in life come from the most impossible choices. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find something real. Sometimes a contract marriage becomes the truest love story of all. The end.